Your attention span is so cooked by TikTok that I'm going to explain a possible war, a stock market-style betting platform, and the most important chips on Earth using cats. Because apparently, that's the only way your brain can survive geopolitics. Here's the ridiculous part. People are literally putting real money on whether China will attack Taiwan, not a video game, not a prediction between two sports teams. An actual possible war involving China, Taiwan, and potentially the United States. And some people looked at that nightmare and said, yeah, I'll bet on it. Welcome to modern capitalism. Now, to understand why Taiwan matters so much, forget the map for a second. Look at what's being manufactured there. Semiconductors. Tiny pieces of silicon that control phones, cars, computers, data centers, artificial intelligence systems, missiles, satellites, weapons, basically anything that requires a brain made of electronics. And Taiwan is ridiculously important to that entire supply chain. The crown jewel is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. TSMC is the giant factory behind some of the most advanced chips used by companies around the world. And Taiwan has become the dominant manufacturing center for the most advanced semiconductor production. That's why a small island can make Washington, Beijing, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and every technology company on Earth suddenly develop an intense interest in geography. Because if something happens to Taiwan, the consequences don't stay in Taiwan. A blockade could disrupt shipping. A war could shut down factories. Insurance costs could explode. Suppliers could stop moving. Electricity could be disrupted. Workers might not even be able to reach the factories. And suddenly the world's technology industry discovers that its entire digital empire depends on a few buildings sitting on a very politically sensitive island. It's like building the world's biggest palace and putting the only electrical outlet underneath a sleeping tiger. Now let's talk about why China cares so much. Taiwan's political situation comes directly out of China's civil war. After the Qing dynasty fell in 1911, China went through decades of warlord conflicts, Japanese invasion, and eventually a civil war between the nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the communists, led by Mao Zedong. The communists won on the mainland in 1949 and established the People's Republic of China. The nationalist government of the Republic of China retreated to Taiwan and continued operating from there. And that's the origin of the modern Taiwan dispute. So when Beijing says Taiwan is part of China and reunification is necessary, it's not inventing the historical connection out of thin air. The People's Republic claims Taiwan as part of Chinese territory and has long demanded eventual reunification. But Taiwan developed its own government, military, political system, and eventually a democratic society. And that's where history becomes a geopolitical bar fight, because Taiwan isn't simply another country in the normal diplomatic sense, but it isn't governed by Beijing either. It's a political leftover from a civil war that never reached a final settlement. And yes, history gets even messier. Taiwan was under Japanese rule from 1895 until 1945. So the island has spent modern history being governed by different powers, fighting over identity, and being dragged into conflicts much larger than the island itself. Hong Kong and Macau have their own complicated colonial histories, but don't make the lazy mistake of treating all three as the same situation. They're not. Different treaties, different governments, different historical paths. Taiwan's modern political status comes primarily from the unresolved Chinese Civil War and the Cold War that followed. And that unresolved history is exactly why the United States keeps treating Taiwan as strategically important. Washington doesn't officially recognize Taiwan as an independent state in the same way it recognizes Japan or South Korea, but it maintains deep economic and security ties with Taipei and opposes any unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force. And here's where the geopolitical cynicism kicks in. From Washington's perspective, Taiwan sits in one of the most strategically important parts of the Pacific. It also happens to be sitting on top of an enormous technological advantage, semiconductors. So the argument isn't just about democracy. It isn't just about Chinese nationalism. It isn't just about military strategy. It's also about industrial power. Because whoever controls advanced semiconductor production has enormous leverage over the modern economy. And the United States absolutely does not want China suddenly controlling that leverage. You don't need to believe every conspiracy theory to understand the strategic logic. Washington wants to maintain technological leadership. Beijing wants to reduce dependence on Western technology and secure its own supply chains. Taiwan wants to preserve its current political system and security, and giant corporations want the factories to keep producing chips without anybody launching missiles at them. Everybody has a reason, everybody has a plan, everybody thinks they're the cat protecting the backyard. And then we get polymarket. For anyone whose brain still has one functioning neuron left, polymarket is a prediction market. People buy contracts based on whether a future event happens. Yes. They can literally bet on whether China will invade Taiwan before a certain date. One of the markets tracking a possible Chinese invasion before the end of 2026 had attracted tens of millions of dollars in trading volume. And depending on the moment, the implied probability can move dramatically. Think about how insane that is. A military crisis happens in the Taiwan Strait, a Chinese aircraft carrier moves, a U.S. politician gives a speech, Taiwan announces a new defense policy, a new military exercise begins, and somewhere online, somebody is watching the price of a prediction contract move by a few cents. War becomes a chart. Geopolitical fear becomes liquidity. Potential catastrophe becomes a betting market. And somebody is sitting there saying, if Beijing invades, I make money. Congratulations, humanity. We turned existential anxiety into an asset class. Now, before your geography grades collapse completely, here's something important. A prediction market is not a magic crystal ball. If polymarket says something has a 5% chance of happening, that doesn't mean some intelligence agency secretly calculated the exact probability. It means people trading the market are pricing that possibility at roughly that level. And people can be wrong. Very, very wrong. But the market is still interesting because it shows how much money people are willing to put behind their expectations. And now we reach the really important question. Why are semiconductors worth risking this much geopolitical chaos over? Because the modern economy runs on them. Cars need them. Phones need them. Cloud computing needs them. AI needs them. Weapons systems need them. Satellites need them. Factories need them. Your stupid little refrigerator needs them. And Taiwan is deeply embedded in the production of advanced chips. That's why the United States is spending hundreds of billions of dollars trying to expand domestic semiconductor manufacturing. TSMC is building major facilities in Arizona. Japan is expanding semiconductor capacity. Europe is trying to strengthen its own industry. Everybody suddenly wants a chip factory. Why? Because nobody wants to wake up one morning and realize, oh, we can't get the thing that makes everything else work. And China knows exactly how valuable this technology is. That's why Beijing has poured enormous resources into domestic semiconductor development. The goal isn't simply to make cheap chips. It's to reduce dependence on foreign technology and eventually compete at the highest levels. So this is bigger than Taiwan. It's a technological arms race. The United States wants to preserve its lead. China wants to close the gap. Taiwan wants to remain indispensable. And the rest of the world is quietly praying that nobody presses the stupid button. Now hit like and follow Paws of War, you financially illiterate little furball. Because we haven't even gotten to the funniest part. Imagine two cats fighting over the same backyard. One cat says, "This land belongs to me." The other says, "No, you're not taking it." And then a third cat walks in and says, "By the way, I own the factory producing the parts that your weapons need." That's Taiwan. It's not simply strategic territory. It's a critical node in the technological economy, and that creates one of the strangest deterrents in modern geopolitics. Everybody has incentives to control Taiwan, but everybody also has incentives not to destroy Taiwan's semiconductor industry. Because if the island gets turned into a battlefield, the factories could become useless. You can win the territory and still lose the thing that made the territory valuable. That's the nightmare scenario. A massive economic shock, global shortages, financial panic, supply chain chaos, and potentially a military confrontation between nuclear-armed powers. All because the most strategically important pieces on the board happen to sit very close together. So when you hear someone say, Taiwan is just a tiny island, tell them to put down the bong. Taiwan is one of the most important pieces of the global industrial system, and Polymarket has turned the possibility of war over that island into a financial instrument. Think about that. Governments are preparing, companies are diversifying, factories are being rebuilt in different countries, military planners are studying maps. And somewhere in a laptop, some guy named Brad is betting $12,000 that Beijing does something stupid before Christmas. That's modern geopolitics. The old empires fought over gold. The colonial powers fought over land. Industrial powers fought over oil. And now the world's great powers are fighting over something smaller than your fingernail, a chip. Because the chip controls the machine controls the economy, and the economy controls power. So this isn't really a story about Taiwan alone. It's about who gets to control the technology that runs the planet. China wants greater sovereignty and reunification. The United States wants to prevent China from dominating a crucial strategic position and overtaking America's technological lead. Taiwan wants to preserve its current political reality. Corporations want uninterrupted production. Investors want profits. And ordinary people, they want their phone to work. That's the cruel joke. The richest and most powerful cats on the planet are moving billions around because of a tiny piece of silicon. Meanwhile, the average cat is staring at a grocery receipt, wondering how the hell a bag of food got this expensive. You're part of the 99%. You generate the wealth. The billionaires keep an enormous share of it. You cheer for them. You defend them. You fight online for billionaires who wouldn't recognize your name if you delivered their groceries. You live in a system where you can finance an iPhone in 12, 24, 36 payments. But somehow, basic healthcare still feels like a luxury package. At least you have the iPhone, right? You can watch the rich cats gamble on the future in beautiful 4K resolution. That's capitalism's masterpiece. The guy controlling billions gets another billion. The guy producing the work gets another monthly payment. And the whole planet is one bad decision away from finding out exactly how fragile this beautiful machine really is. So subscribe to Paws of War, you little geopolitical hairball. Because while the powerful cats bet on Taiwan, chips, war, and global dominance, you'll be sitting there counting coins for a fish-flavored leftover pouch. They're betting on the future. You're paying for the present. And when the two biggest cats in the backyard start fighting over the same piece of silicon, the real question isn't who wins. It's whether the rest of us can afford the damn fallout.